YouTube! Welcome to Fred's Full Throttle. Today I'm going to be doing a deep dive on the brakes for the C8 Z06. I'll be going over the different options, comparing the pros and cons of each, providing some additional consideration, and then at the end I'll be sharing with you what I'll be putting on my own Z06. This is my third deep dive video in an ongoing series about picking the various options of the C8 Z06. Feel free to check out the other videos. I'll include a link in the description below. Well, we've got a lot to cover today, so let's get right into it. First, let's go over the two types of brakes available for the car. There's the standard cast iron brakes, and then the optional carbon ceramic brakes. Most cars offer a cast iron or steel alloy brake rotor as an option, and on the C8 Z06, much like the Stingray, this will be the default option. The standard brakes will offer good heat dissipation, consistent feel, and offer strong performance. Now on the standard brakes, the front rotors are going to be 14.6 inches in diameter with 6 piston calipers, and then the rear discs are going to be 15 inches with 4 piston calipers. This isn't a typo. The front discs are actually slightly smaller than the rears on the iron brakes, which isn't so common on most sports cars, but it is the case here. The brakes themselves are manufactured by Brembo, widely known as the premier manufacturer of high-performance automotive brakes. The brakes will come with 6 different caliper colors, though some of the colors are only going to be available with the carbon ceramic brakes. Now the other option for the C8 Z06 are carbon ceramic brakes, also referred to as CCBs. These are an optional upgrade for the car, which can be spec'd individually or as a mandatory part of the Z07 performance package. So just what exactly is a carbon ceramic brake? Well, unlike the standard cast iron brakes, the CCBs are made of a composite material comprised of several different substances and a complex manufacturing process. To start, silicone resin is mixed with small fibers of carbon and then injected into a mold in the shape of a brake disc. Channels are molded radially with either removable cores or a special plastic to create cooling vents within the disc. The resulting disc is then subjected to very high pressures and temperatures, which transform that resin into a polymer. Then the disc is cooled down with water before undergoing a multi-day baking process, which heats the disc up to over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The very high temperatures trigger a chemical and structural change in the disc, which transforms the polymer into a silicon carbide. I am simplifying the complete process a bit, so I'll include a link in the description with a more detailed explanation. But that's the gist of it. Upon completion of this heating, the disc is trued and machined with diamond-tipped tools to exacting specifications. And then before being fitted to the car, the disc is coated with an anti-oxidation compound to protect it from oxidation that could result from the extreme temperatures it's going to be exposed to. The whole process to create the brake disc takes anywhere up to about 20 days. That time, along with the repeated high temperatures and heating, is what contributes to these being a very expensive type of brake. Carbon ceramic discs have a tough crystalline structure similar to that of diamonds. This makes them very hard and durable compared to the cast iron discs. This is also why diamond-tipped tools are used for the final machining and truing. Carbon ceramic brakes were first created in the 70s for aerospace applications such as for the Concorde, and their suitability for other applications was soon recognized. Formula One cars and trains were soon to follow, and then in 2001, the first production car fitted with carbon ceramic brakes was actually the Porsche 911 GT2. Alright, now that we got the science out of the way and we know how they're created, let's get on to the more fun part, CCBs on the C8 Z06. The front rotors will be 15.7 inches in diameter with 6 piston calipers, and then the rears are going to be 15.4 inches in diameter with 4 piston calipers. You'll notice that unlike the steel discs which I mentioned a minute ago, the CCBs maintain a more standard front brake discs being larger configuration. GM hasn't yet given an explanation as to that difference. Now for the C8 Z06, the price as a standalone option is estimated to be somewhere between $8,000 and $9,000. On the C7 Z06, for comparison, the option for CCBs was about $7,500. However, for a 3-month window during that production, they were temporarily only a $5,000 option. Now that we've covered what the two options are, let's go over the pros and cons of each to help everyone decide what might be right for them and their cars. First, we're going to cover the pros of the standard brakes. Number one is that the standard brakes are less expensive, both to purchase and to replace. Next, they offer the same stopping distances as CCBs. A common misconception, which is pretty widespread on the forums, is that CCBs offer better stopping distances. That's actually not true. There are other advantages to CCBs, which we'll cover soon, but stopping distance isn't one of them. Number 3, from a safety point of view, there's no real-world disadvantages. In everyday driving, you're not any less safe or able to stop from speed with regular brakes. And next, feel is consistent over a wide range of speeds in normal driving conditions. Now for the cons of the standard brakes. The biggest one is that they wear faster than CCBs. Standard brake rotors will generally last anywhere from 30,000 to 70,000 miles before needing replacement. Next, when standard brakes are abused or overworked, meaning that they haven't given a bit of a break to cool off, they can warp from uneven heat dispersion. You can notice this as a pulsing feeling when you lightly apply the brakes, and this can also cause uneven or accelerated brake pad wear. And then lastly, standard brakes generate quite a bit of brake dust. Different pads can help with this, but from the factory, your wheels are going to get dusty pretty quickly. I know for my C7 Grand Sport, about every 2 drives, my wheels are caked with dust and need a wash. Overall, the standard brakes are a great option for most drivers and will easily live up to what most people are going to ask of them. All right, let's get on to the CCBs. First, let's go over the pros. First, no corrosion or rust. Since the discs don't contain any metal, they don't corrode or rust like their iron counterparts. Even on an immaculately cared for car with the steel brakes, if you let it sit for a week or two, unless you're in a really dry climate, you're generally going to notice some rust on the discs from oxidation with the air. Next is a longer lifespan. Due to the increased durability and strength of CCBs, they're actually designed to be a lifetime part for most cars. They wear down much slower than their iron counterparts, and even the pads last a lot longer between replacement than standard brakes. Next is heat dispersion. While iron brakes do a good job of dissipating heat, carbon ceramic brakes dissipate heat significantly better. This is largely why they were initially used in some of the most demanding applications. They operate really well at high temperatures. Next, through their material properties and inherent characteristics, they don't actually warp at high temperatures like standard brakes that I mentioned a few minutes ago. They also produce less brake dust. The brake dust they do produce is lighter in color and generally doesn't stick to things like the wheels, so your wheels will look cleaner longer. CCBs also have a much higher operating temperature than their standard counterparts, which is why they started out in very high temperature applications. Now this all leads into my next point, which is that they have much less or frequently zero fade at a track pace. This is why many race cars opt for CCBs. You get a consistent feel over long periods of time at sustained high temperatures. And then when they are up to temperature, carbon ceramic brakes are better in wet conditions than standard brakes. Up to temperature means that it may take braking a handful of times to carry some residual heat, but in general, CCBs will offer a more consistent performance in wet conditions. Now this is a big one. Carbon ceramic brakes are up to 70% lighter than their iron counterparts. This can actually add up to a reasonable amount of weight savings, less rotating mass, slightly better acceleration, and even fuel economy. And at least on paper, maybe a slightly better braking distance, though it may not be measurable. And lastly, while not a real tangible improvement, I'll mention pedigree and resale together. Brembo, for example, is widely known as the best name in the brakes business, and you can see them being used by a vast array of race teams in many different motorsports. Additionally, having CCBs will also command a premium resale value over standard brakes. Wow, so all that sounds great. Sign everybody up. Well, not so fast. There actually is still a few downsides to having carbon ceramic brakes. Let's go through those now. The first is that they are expensive, both to purchase and to replace. Prices have come down over time, but when they're sold on a car, you're getting a significant discount, and replacing a single rotor can cost anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 for most applications. Now, ideally, this is a lifetime part, but if you did somehow damage them, be prepared to spend quite a bit. Next is that when they're cold or you're driving at lower speeds, carbon ceramic brakes can have a bit of a spongy feel. They tend to offer softer feedback than iron brakes, enough so that people changing over to them sometimes need to recalibrate their expectations a little bit. Some people do get disappointed when they first start using them, but keep in mind that low speed and cold braking is not what they're really designed for. Next, depending on the brand and model of the brakes, carbon ceramics can be noisy or even squeaky, especially at lower speeds like around town. Not all sets suffer from this, but it can be a consideration because to an outside observer, your otherwise fancy car is going to sound like something might be wrong with it, even if it's completely normal. This is something brake companies have worked to limit or eliminate, but it still does occasionally happen. And last, and probably the biggest one, is that from a safety point of view, there's no real advantages for normal driving. If you're grand touring and doing road trips, or you're doing the occasional track day or HPDE, if you're blasting around in the mountain roads out in the countryside, you're probably not going to get much, if any, performance or safety benefit. You'll stop just as fast with the standard brakes and overall have a more consistent feel, and likely rarely or never dip into that envelope where you would really get a benefit from the CCBs. These brakes are designed and focused on high performance driving, really above what you can do legally on any road, over a sustained period of time. If you're a frequent track or performance event driver, a racer, or really pushing your car repeatedly, then maybe these are the brakes for you. If not though, and if you're being honest with yourself, you likely don't need them and can save some money. All right, so now let's get into my take on this. Early in owning my C7 Grand Sport, I didn't do any track events. Then slowly over time, I've started doing more and more, and now I'm doing at least a handful of track events per year. Most recently, last year at a car control clinic at Lime Rock Park, I was just starting to get into the edges of brake fade after a bunch of sessions involving really hard braking. I like the idea of less brake dust, and I do plan on continually increasing the amount of my track driving. As I'm becoming a more competent driver, I think that carbon ceramics are something that I may not need right now. However, I do plan to do more and more track days and track events, and I do think that CCBs will be a feature that in the long run, I might get my money's worth from. So, unlike the competition seats or the carbon fiber wheels, the CCBs are a box that I'm going to check. For those keeping score, here's a quick tally of the options I've selected so far from the 3 deep dive videos that I've done. Seats are going to be GT2, wheels are going to be forged alloys, and then brakes, I'm going to go for the carbon ceramics. Now next week, I'll be back with a C8 Z06 news video, and then back into the next deep dive, so stay tuned. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this, and until next time, Fred out!